What's up, everybody? I'm Reggie Williams, founder and CEO of Ambrosia for Heads, and with me I have Jake Payne. This is our What's the Headline podcast. I think we're up to number 50, man.
Man, time flies when you're having fun,
Yeah,
you know?
right. Yeah, word. And it's a perfect way to bring in what we're gonna do today. We're gonna do something a little special. Each year, Jake used to nudge me and push me into doing a half of the year, or at the half of the year review of the best albums of the year thus far. And so we're going to do that. We're going to limit it to 10. If anyone checked it out, you can check it out. We did our top 20 of 2020 in December. And we like to keep ourselves honest by putting a cap on it. Typically it's 15 albums because 20 is quite a bit. And, we could just do endless albums, but we think there's something special about really honing in and finding the top albums of the year at a set number. So this year we're going to do 10 for the mid-year review. And I got to say, we do not know how it's going to end. Same as last time. We've got 6 or 7 that we agree upon, and then we've got another 7 or so that both of us like, and we're going to hash it out. And hopefully, we'll get to 10. I would love your comments. Anybody who's watching this on YouTube, you can also listen on Spotify, Apple Music, and everywhere else you can find podcasts. Thank you for the attention, for your attention, for your time, all that stuff. And yo, how you doing, man?
Man, I'm doing well. I love what you just said. I really have appreciated reading the comments on all the different, platforms. It's such an honor that people want to spend their time listening, to you and I, hash it out. And yeah, it's great to be here, man. It's been a really interesting year for music. What kind of 2021 do you think it's been?
Well, yo, before we get into that, man, I wanted to ask you a couple questions. I
Okay.
think we should talk about this, set this up. So, how many albums would you say you listen to on average per week? New albums.
Wow.
New albums.
So full disclosure, I have a nice flat screen TV. It's not even plugged in. Like I am somebody that uh pretty much consumes almost all of my media through audio at this point. I wake up every morning and I do, news podcasts, New York Times, NPR, and then I go right into music. And for me, it's always a balance of classics, things you want to hear, songs, albums, etc. I've been doing this thing, and I think I've shared on the pod where I've been revisiting a lot of things that people tell me they like that I might have looked over throughout the years. And then I always, whether I've been daily in the industry or, freelancing, doing side hustles, I always want to just listen to what's coming out in hip hop. So to answer your question, I mean, you know, at any given point, I'm probably consuming 20 new hip hop albums a week. And at the beginning of a year, that leads into, that bleeds into the previous year. But yeah, what about you?
So that's like 1,000 albums per week just on the hip hop tip, right?
1,000 albums? I would
Sorry,
say
sorry,
so.
1,000 albums per year on the hip hop tip.
So last year when they do that, Spotify wrapped up, I think they told me I listened to between 3 and 4 thousand artists last year. And I'm somebody, I run through a lot of playlists, so don't get that that sounds a little probably inflated to what it is. But yeah, I would say very much, that kind of consumption.
And so, and all of that is hip hop, or is there, in addition to that, is there stuff from other genres?
Stuff from other genres. I mean, as far as new music, you are one of my main sources. Like if you like, I think last year you kind of put me up on the new Tame Impala album, and I was certainly aware of them, but fell down a rabbit hole with that. There's a few folks in my ecosystem that I really tap into and trust, or I might read a review, but most of that is hip hop. As far as new music, my daily consumption, usually after news, I slide into jazz, or, you tell me I don't like R&B, so I'll say I listen to a lot of classic soul music. And then by lunchtime, I'm into beats, rhymes, and life. And I do love, I mean, not for nothing, I love classic rock. I love 60s and 70s and early 80s, pop rock, a lot of that stuff too. So it's always a balance, but hip hop is my dominant genre far and away.
All right. So last couple of questions, and then I'll answer these myself too. What percentage of the hip hop albums you listen to would you say fit with the scope of AFH?
It's a great question. I would say 60%. I mean, you and I over our next month makes 8 years of working together. There have been times where we've really challenged, I think, the AFH ecosystem, but a lot of it has been a mirror of really your taste, but also mine. But it's funny, like, I look at this list that we're going to talk about today, and I've been asking myself over the weekend of like, what are we missing? What am I overlooking? And it's funny because one of my favorite, probably not 10, but right now 15 albums of the year is Khaled's album. You put me on to the Young Dolph Key Glock album, which I've been really enjoying. So there's always things that I like and listen to that don't fit the AFH space.
Okay. All right. That's dope, man. That's great to hear. So I'll run down mine too. I think it's important to talk about this, for anybody checking in, to let people know, one, that we have a very, very strong filter for AFH. I
Mm-hmm.
think that sometimes it's easy to confuse us praising everything that we talk about with us with thinking that we like everything that we listen to. And that's not remotely the case. The whole point of AFH is really to give a curated experience of the finest hip hop. And in order to do that, Jake and I power through a bunch of stuff to get to what we think is the best and what we believe you all will think is the best too. And so for me, I'm a dude who bought 5,000 CDs with his own money, just always been like an absolute just music junkie. And in school was using my school loans and doing all sorts of dumb things, running up credit card debt, buying music. And so now to be able to have it at my fingertips for, 10, 12 bucks a month is absolutely insane. So I go through a similar process as you. On Friday mornings, my routine is to scroll through the new music. I'll look at it on Apple Music because I set that up based on, on my iTunes and on my playlist from like decades of ripping. And then I look at it on Spotify, and Spotify has a really skewed perspective of what my taste is because, I'm primarily listening to the AFH podcast there, or sorry, the AFH playlist there, in which, by the way, will feature all the music that we're going to discuss today. And so Spotify thinks I'm a dude who just strictly listens to hip hop, but I also confuse the algorithm by listening to a lot of I'll listen to Rap Radar and playlists like that too. Sorry, Rap Caviar, to make sure that I'm keeping my ears fresh and not just too deep into the AFH scope of content. But I would love for people, to drop in the comments if you think that there's some things that we mentioned as sort of our guilty pleasures that we should be indulging in more for AFH. Also, we try a lot on our Facebook and social media, and like Jake said, we'll stretch things. We've put Trippy Red on our pocket on our playlist in the past. We put Extinction, but things that really fit within that boom bap lens. And so, it's interesting and difficult to know exactly what the scope for AFH is. And I think I started it out a little bit broader. I used to have a lot of Drake and super pop Nicki Minaj and stuff like that. And, gradually we started to tighten it a little bit. I got called out for that a number of times
Yeah.
before you join. But still, I think, that there's room to continue to expand the brand. But, I used to go and buy, I'd say, between 4 to 6 albums per week.
Wow.
Now I will listen to between 5 and 10. So it's interesting, it's up a little bit, but it's not up a ton from back in the day. And part of that's just a function of time. But I treat it very much like research and homework, like you do as well. And I'll start off with the AFH relevant albums because I'm usually skewing and looking for things for the playlist, skimming. And then I'll start to expand it to things that I think keep my ears fresh and young. So I'll go to at the Gunna and like Young Thug or Polo G or Migos or whatever the release is of the week for artists of the particular moment. And I tend to gravitate toward even those current artists who have been around for a little bit, like Migos. I love that album. I actually put a song on the playlist this week for it. And then I'll hit other things too, which I call palate cleansers. I think it's really important if you are either making hip hop or evaluating it to keep your ears, fresh with other genres of music, so that you can hear things like from a different perspective. And so I'll listen to Billie Eilish or Casey Musgraves. I like a lot of female voices and things like that. So I'd say that I listen to 510. So that's what, 250, 500 albums per year, and it might be a little bit more than that. And that's just the new stuff. The old stuff, I've got a ton of stuff as well. So we try and do our homework for this. We try to be really respectful of your time by dedicating our time. And so that's it, man. That's the setup. But so you said albums for 2020, the year in 2021. What was your question earlier?
Yeah, I mean, just what kind of year do you think it's been in music so far?
Man, I think it has been a fantastic year in music. And it's not surprising when you think about it. When you step back, 2020 was pretty good. I thought that the albums that were nominated for the Grammys were amazing. There was a lot of good, high quality underground music. But it was a bit of a quiet year, and I had expected people to be releasing more music given the year that we had. But I think what happened is that people spent that year reflecting, creating, and really decided to let the floodgates open in 2021 in anticipation of being able to go out and tour and make more money off the music they're creating. And so now I think we've had an amazing first half of the year so far, a lot of variety. We've had some heavyweights come out. I think we are expecting more in the form of like Kendrick and Travis Scott and Drake. So I think it's been a really good year so far. How about you?
I agree, and I think that especially in the first 3 or 4 months of the year, people were by and large still inside, both due to quarantine as well as weather. For a lot of the country, a lot of the world, and I think that it was a really good space for, the kind of like headphone rap. You know what I mean? Like I think that we've seen some really dense didactic MCs. I think we've seen some really interesting dark production in 2021 that reflects the times. I'm curious now that we're, you know, at an alarming rate, the world is opening up around us, and now people are not just ready to go out, but they've been ready for, a year and a half to go out. So I'm very curious what we're going to see. But I think it's been an impressive year, and I think that it's it's a very level playing field. Like even that term underground, I struggle with, and I know what you mean. But you look at some of the numbers that quote unquote underground artists are doing, and it's insane right now, just in terms of streams, for the reasons you just said of having it at your fingertips. You no longer have to seek out, a Fat Beats or an independent, record store, hip hop shop, and shout out to all of them that are fighting the good fight. But we can all find the same albums on Friday morning at the same time. And I think that leads to a really exciting horizon for hip hop, especially.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think underground is really kind of defined relative to radio play.
Hmm.
And, to your point, radio is less and less relevant now. It's really about streaming platforms. I think, it's a counterpoint to mainstream for me. And I like our brother, of the brand, Justin Hunt's term, connoisseur rap.
Yeah.
I like it a lot. I think it says a lot. It's about discerning taste and things like that. Not to say that um, our preference, meaning the AFH community's preferences, better than others. But I do think that we tend to be connoisseurs of rap historically, and now too. And so I like that term.
Me too.
Um, so we're gonna cut this list to 10, right? And right
That's our
now
job.
we've agreed on about seven or so. And we got another 7 or 8 that both of us are going to go through and try and figure out what will get those last 3 spots, man. So I thought it was going to be tough when we did this for 2020, and it ended up not being too difficult. This one, man, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
We might be here for a long time. We might have to make this a live stream. So, get some input.
I
But
feel it. Yeah.
Yeah, so the way we're gonna do it is each one of us is gonna present an album, whether or not we agree upon it, and then toward the end we're gonna present albums that we're kind of advocating for. We'll break it down. We'll talk about general themes of the album, production on it, key tracks, features, things like that, and break it down. But again, all this music is featured on our playlist on Spotify. You can find that. It's just Ambrosia for Heads. And yo, let's you ready to kick it off?
Let's do it.
All
You're
right,
up
cool.
first.
Yeah, I'll take first, man. So first should be no surprise if you listen to our playlist or read our site over the last couple of years. I don't know that there's been a single artist who has been featured more than this artist on the playlist. Either by way of his own projects, which are voluminous, or through features, which are also quite often. But it's Benny the Butcher from Griselda. He released the Plugs I Met 2 this year. A sequel to an album that came out in 2019. Is that right?
That sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah. The first album had Royce 5'9", Pusha T. Was just absolutely
Black Thought.
Black Thought. Yeah, unbelievable. It was Benny's coming out party, in my opinion. He had been around. A lot of people who follow things closely knew who he was, but this one, I think, going toe to toe with MCs like that and holding his own and or like winning showed just what a phenomenal MC he is. The beats were pristine, really amazing, and so Plugs I'm at too carried a lot of weight, a lot of pun intended, a lot
Yeah.
of expectations. 18-wheeler weight.
And one thing I want to add, not to correct you, but because
Yeah,
Benny, so
I'm gonna get to it too. I think Harry.
no. I was
Yeah,
just gonna
yeah.
say Royce was on Tana Talk 3, and that all came out in an onslaught. But the push, the Jadakiss, Black Thought, that was Plugs I Met 1. And I know
Oh,
it's easy to
word.
bleed
Okay.
that together.
Yeah,
But
good.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, word. Yeah, so he's going hard against lots of MCs over a couple of projects. Plugs I'm at too. He did something different. He made the entire album in collaboration with Harry Fraud, producer who is, So Benny's typically over Derringer beats. He's over Alchemist beats. He's expanded to Hit Boy recently. Harry Fraud, I think, fits that genre that Alchemist and Derringer have, a very soulful, eerie, dark street vibes, for lack of a better term, just dark chords and really, just soulful music. And so I can see that pairing. And it's interesting to hear Benny on this. It's the second album of the last like year, 12 months or so, where he's done it with one producer. He did his album with Hit Boy also, and I'm forgetting what's that one called?
Burden of Proof.
Burden of Proof. Yes, thank you. And so I like Benny with these cohesive sounding projects. It's short, only 28 minutes, far from sweet. Given the subject matter he's covering, he definitely goes back and revisits a lot of the themes that he covered on Plugs on Met One. And in my opinion, I don't think it's as strong as the original, but it is consistent with Benny's catalog over the last several years, which has been incredibly strong. You think it's better or as good as Plugs I Met One?
No, I agree with you. I think Plugs I Met 1 is a really high bar, but I definitely think this is one of the better albums, and we'll talk about that later of 2021.
Yeah. So key features on it are Chinks, Two Chains, Fat Joe, French Montana, and Rick Hyde. French Montana, Jim Jones, and Rick Hyde. So right off, like the features are very different than those on Plugs I'm at One. Plugs I'm at One was just straight, just like ill lyricists, guys who just like, just are eating MCs like for dinner.
A lot
This
of these features are Harry Fraud's people, right?
is that right? Like, well, some like but like I don't think Two Chains and Fat Joe, guys like that. Like
That's a good point.
Benny's going more mainstream on this one, and he did so on Burden of Proof too. He had a song with Lil Wayne and Big Sean. He's gradually getting us our ears prepared for the track that is rumored to be out there with Drake. And showcasing that he can rhyme with anyone, whether it be those from the underground or those from the mainstream. And this one is much more leaning toward the mainstream tip, French Montana, things like that. So key tracks for me, not surprisingly, joints that are on the playlist. So overall, featuring Chinks is just like incredibly soulful, very much in pocket with what what we expect from Benny. Live by it. The production of that's outstanding. There's a lot of movement, a lot of strings. Very very lush production, and I find Benny's flow is at its finest on this track. Just really in the pocket. Talking back, Benny and Fat Joe on that, like that's a surprising one, man. Like I did not expect him to be on a track with Fat Joe, and it's a real cool, like a lot of flute on the track, and he and Joe sound surprisingly great together, man. Like really really good. Their styles mesh. Neither one of them is both say really dope substantive things, but neither one is like the rappy rap guy, the super lyrical, guy who's gonna just, have 100 words per sentence and stuff like that. They're very efficient with their words, so their styles complement each other really nicely. And then last is Thanksgiving, which I think was the first single. That one is when I first heard it. I have to admit I was a little bit disappointed because I had a sound in mind that I was expecting based on Plugs I Met One. But when I listened to it more for what it was, it grew on me. And I love what Benny is saying in it. He's like, you should thank me basically for being in this game and blessing it. Like it's really, really dope themes. So that's my take on Benny and Harry Fraud's Plugs I Met Too.
So for me to kick things off, I'm gonna go with an album that's been out. One of the longest albums, released early this year, is Madlib Sound Ancestors. So Madlib's coming off of, even though he's, at this point, 25 plus years removed from his some of his first placements on the Alcoholic second album, as a producer and working with Loot Pack, he just continues to climb. And it seems like every 3 or 4 years, Madlib gets this turbo pack and does all these things. And certainly Pinata with Freddie Gibbs was eye-opening to a lot of people, because I think at a time when Freddie was finding his way in album making, I mean, Lord knows he'd been around a while. It was an unlikely pairing, and both of those guys outdid themselves, at the top of the last decade. And then more recently in 2019, when they came to the table with Bandana, just truly remarkable. And to watch Madlib and Gibbs on RCA Keep Cool Records, so to have a big budget behind them to make these really interesting music videos that kind of played into a narrative, it was just wild to see. And I imagine, I mean, I don't think our readers, but I imagine a lot of the listening community at large, that was a good jumping off point for both of those artists. In 2019, I think you and I both agreed, that album and Rhapsodies were really kind of two of our top contenders. Grammy snub, of course, but great to see those guys. And correct me if I'm wrong, our readers in 2019 declared that the best album, right?
Yeah, I believe so. Yep.
And we ran that the night of the 2020 Grammy Awards, which of course is the day that Kobe, his daughter, and 5 others passed. So after all of that, what does Madlib do next? He comes back with another instrumental album. And for those that have been paying attention on Madlib's, even when he was with Stone's Throw, he'd just been churning out these Beat Conductor albums most of his career, and he doesn't deviate from that formula. He put out something like, there were so many volumes of those Beat Conductor series in the mid 2010s, and you really had to be a diehard fan to follow. But he puts out this new joint called Sound Ancestors, and it very much upholds that structure. What's so interesting about this album to me is that it's really a collaboration, but you pick it up, only Madlib's name is on it, but it's a collaboration with Fortet, which electronic music heads may know, London born, veteran career, kind of is parallel to Madlib's, goes back to the late 90s, had remixed Doom, had remixed J-Lib, had opened for Radiohead. I mean, Fortet is a star, whether folks are aware or not. And Fortet co-writes this, arranges, edits, curates, does all of the things behind the scenes with Madlib. And Madlib recently talked about this on Talib Kweli's People's Party podcast. But again, all of that said, it's everything that for folks that have been paying attention you expect. So an instrumental album, and another case, like you said, the first single is one of the key tracks for me, Road of the Lonely Ones. And Madlib has this incredible ability, he always has, of taking sometimes simple, sometimes complex instrumental songs and just injecting them with emotion. And that's so interesting to me because, I watched the interview with Talib Kweli, and Kweli is hands down one of my favorite interviewers, especially of hip hop peers. And I think Kweli struggled a bit, and him and Madlib have history, but Madlib is a difficult interview. He is not a very chatty person. He's a big, like, 3-word answer guy, very matter of fact, very like, I put shit out, do with it what you will. But yet you go to his music and there's so much depth and range there. And that is a song that I continue to come back to. Another one is Dirt Knock, which I look at and I'm like, damn, I think this is the Fortet influence, because there's a female vocal, and it kind of has this like, lo-fi indie rock quality to it. And Madlib still just hits it with that knock, pun intended, to the title, of just the way he lays out his percussion. And then, you go off of title and it's on the playlist, it's on the AFH playlist, but 2 for 2 for Dilla. I think that along with like T3, Madlib has really honored, and the Roots did it too, but he's really honored Dilla since he passed. I mean, those guys made an incredible album together with the J-Lib project, Champion Sound. But I remember in 2009, Madlib released The Beat Conductor Volume 5 and 6, which is really one of his favorite works of this kind. And I think this one competes on that level. And that project was an homage to Dilla. And so that you're getting more of that here, with kind of a needle drop, very like purist hip hop sound. You got the echo chamber in there. It's just classic Madlib. And I love this album. I think it has incredible longevity. I think that, like so much of his catalog, I'll be listening to this, Lord willing, when I'm in my 50s and 60s. It's music you can put on for a dinner party. It's music you can put on in the car. It's music you can play for somebody. And you and I have gone to the mat for instrumental albums before. A few years ago, Pete Rock put out Return of the SP12 100, and you and I really got behind that album, which was just a series of beats. And this is another one that takes a genre that I feel like often breaks away from hip hop. And it's a great reminder that this album should be compared side by side with, lyrical hip hop too.
Yeah, man, it's hard to pull off a great instrumental album. A lot of times they can get repetitive and easy to kind of zone out, but these two that you just mentioned in particular are standouts for me, and Madlib definitely pulled it off for me. So cool. Next one for me is Judas and the Black Messiah. This is music inspired by the film that starred Daniel Kaluuya and Lakeith Stanfield. Really powerful film. Won a couple of Academy Awards, and a lot of awards before that. The soundtrack to me is outstanding. It's hard for me to think about it as being inspired by, because I don't hear a lot of themes captured in the album that were, relevant to the movie. But there are a couple tracks that do. But as a soundtrack, for me, it's a throwback to the ones of the 90s. Some of the great ones like Juice and Menace to Society and Boys in the Hood that were just packed with like the current stars at the time. To me, it stands as a 2020s version of that, with just an incredible all-star lineup. Like those albums too, it's a nice blend of hip hop and soul. It's not just straight rap music. Mixes things up and keeps it fresh for you. And then Hit Boy, who executive produced it, just continues his winning streak of 2020. where he produced Benny and Nas and I can't remember who else, but just had a great like all-star year. So for me, I went into this with a lot of expectations, given the track list and his involvement, and it didn't disappoint. The features on the album that the artists featured are her, Nas, Black Thought, Nipsey Hussle, Jay Z, De La Soul, Del the Funky Homo Sapien, JID, Rhapsody, Masego, Smino, Saba, Dom Kennedy, BJ the Chicago Kid, ASAP Rocky, and his namesake Rakim. It's pretty amazing. And that's not even the full track list of features, but just some of the key ones that I pulled out. Key tracks. It starts off with an intro from Fred Hampton, which is appropriate, a snippet of a speech of his, but then jumps into Fight for You by her. And that song to me is a perfect way to kick this off because it really is an ode to the times in terms of its sound. It sounds like it's a Sly Stone sample, or if not, very much aligned with Sly Stone's sound. And her just continues to impress, man. Phenomenal guitarist, phenomenal pianist. Her tone is just incredible. And she can do any style, but she seems to be really at home with these kind of old soul vibes. So it's a really great way to kick it off. There's Plead the 45th, which is Smino and Saba. So Saba is an AFH favorite. We did a showcase back, and I think in 2016 for South by Southwest. We had a phenomenal lineup: Els High, Paige Kennedy, Nick Grant, Ninth Wonder, and Rhapsody, King Crooked. Just a really really great lineup, and the only person that we didn't get that I really really wanted was Saba. I just think this guy is incredibly talented. Chicago MC, down with the likes of like Vic Mensa and Chance the Rapper. And Smino is someone who's really gotten on my radar lately. Everything I hear from Smino, I love, man. And Smino just waxes this track. He's got a sing-songy style, almost like a domino, but just really incredibly talented. So Plead the 45th is a great one, and it uses a sample that I was like, yo, I know that sample, and it's actually from Reason from TDE had a song called Fall, which is great. Also big on our playlist for quite some time, and it uses a slowed down version of the same sample. Really dope. Respect My Mind is a song by Dom Kennedy. It's Dom is another guy who's been like around percolating. He Problem. Some of those guys on the West Coast who've just been mainstays in that sound for well over a decade now. And Dom is on a song called Respect My Mind, sounding as good as he's sounded in a long time. Very much an ode to kind of G-Funk. Sounds great. But I think that the kind of cornerstone of the album, the one that people were anticipating the most and was delivered to, was What It Feels Like. And that is a track featuring the late, great Nipsey Hussle. And the first time that he and Jay-Z are on a track. And to me, this one really kind of embodies the themes, especially Jay-Z's verse. It was clear this album came out, I think, in late January, early February at the latest. And Jay-Z's verse had references to the January 6th, uprising at the Capitol. And so clearly Hove wrote that, very timely. Must have been one of the last verses to come in on the album, and speaks not only to that incident, but draws parallels to the things that have happened over the years to citizens of this country who are black, and really really powerful. So all in all, just a really great listen. A lot of great music. It's dominating our playlist right now.
Yeah, man, I enjoyed that album. And it's funny, it's another case where you have these huge artists and that draws me in. And one of the songs that I really like on there is I Declare War by Nardo Wick, which was an artist that I was new to. And then went down a rabbit hole and seeing the other things that he's done. I think he's like 16 or 17 years old. And I enjoy that album a lot too. So for me, next up is Khrysis, The Hour of Khrysis. Khrysis is one of these guys, many people associate him with the Justice League, which was the North Carolina group that, was kind of the affiliates of Little Brother, and out of that we got, you know, Median, Sean Don, the Away Team, you know, Joe Scudda, on and on and on. And that was a really fun time in the mid 2000s when, you know, it just seemed like every artist out of NC or that had gone to North Carolina Central had something really interesting to say. And while Ninth Wonder was the focal producer around it, Khrysis was kind of, um, I would say, the Alchemist to his Premiere, or the Alchemist to his Mugs at the time, of like, you know, this other guy who was making these incredible beats. And, you know, over time, wherever Ninth seemed to go, Khrysis was right there. And over the years, you look at, you know, the Sean Price Monkey Bars album, Onion Head is actually produced by Khrysis. You look at Rhapsody and Anderson Paak's Ooh from a few years ago, it's a Khrysis joint. And even on an album we'll talk about later today, the Busta Rhymes ELE2, he did Best I Can, which is the Rhapsody joint. Khrysis did a lot of the Smith & Wesson album that came out recently. So big part of the Soul Council, you know, and just a fixture of hip hop. But that being said, I mean, Khrysis has put out, he's put out some stuff over the years, but it's always been under the guise of another name. He's got instrumental projects, but he was part of the Away Team with Sean Boog. They put out a series of albums. More recently, he did Jericho Jackson with Elzai, you know, so we got that a few years ago. But this time, it's all about Khrysis. So it's a perfect title. It is one of those compilation producer style albums. It reminds me a lot of, based on the artists, I mean, these are spitters. It reminds me a lot of kind of those early independent Status Selecta albums or those Marco Polo albums. But just it's a demonstration of all that Khrysis can offer. Super talented dude, and all over the playlist. You and I really went crazy over this. Came out on Jamla, but the joints that I would highlight or Keep Walking On, which is the Del the Funky Homo Sapien track. I don't. You mentioned him on the Black Judas soundtrack. I'm not sure Del was on there. Is he?
On the you know what? You're right. You're right. I had that from the Khrysis. You're right. You're right.
Right. And I don't mean to be Mr. Correction,
Yeah,
but
no,
I'm
I'm good.
trying to
No,
anticipate the commenters.
gotta be
Del's
accurate. Gotta be accurate. Thank you. Yeah.
Del sounds as on point on this song as he has in 10 years. And that's not a knock at Del. I love this joint. The big one that's exciting, and you and I spent the last podcast talking about them, is De La Soul on Mr. Big Mouth, which, you know, De La had delivered, you know, in the Anonymous Nobody in 2016. We've gotten a few joints from them as Lucy's, but this is De La doing what De La did best, especially early in their career, just kind of having fun. One of those songs that lyrically references, you know, 20 other songs, but they're just having fun with kind of a whimsical beat. You know, and the other joint for an artist that I'll talk about in a minute is Asylum, which features Evidence. And Evidence has been one of those artists that has worked a lot with Khrysis over the years. And it's a song that's so introspective and lucid, it could very easily belong on an Ev album, but it goes on Chrysis's. Notably too, he's got Rhapsody and Sarok on the same song, which is a great just gesture of unity from, you know, two of the best women doing it, period, and two of, I would say, two of the just great MCs of the moment. But I really enjoy this album, and there's something so special about producer albums because, you know, you're really getting, you know, I think it's true of the Hit Boy project too. You're watching them work with all of these different people and kind of get in where they fit in. And Khrysis is just such an OG. I mean, we're coming up on 20 years in the game, and I think he did it years ago, but, you know, he stands on his own too. And the Soul Council and Jamla, it's bigger than Ninth. There's all of these phenomenal producers there, and this is just a great reminder of that. And this is one of those albums that I really kind of want to sing into the heavens because I think anybody that's new to it or wasn't aware that it existed, you will not be disappointed.
Word. Yeah. So you're right. I had the De La and Del tracks from that mixed up with Judas and the Black Messiah because those two albums are like phenomenal compilation albums and like really dominant on our playlist. So and came out really I think within a week or so of one another, right? It was
Yes.
very close. So let me ask you this. So in considering best album, do you think that it's fair to allow for albums like this, Judas and the Black Messiah, and Khaled's album, compilation albums that feature multiple artists, to be considered in the best rap album category? Do you think that should belong to like a single artist?
No, I do. I do. I think that, the argument can always be made for a single artist, but I don't like to follow in the Grammys footsteps too much, but it was 2 years ago, right, when they had the Dreamville compilation in there, Revenge of the Dreamers, which is a compilation style album. I mean, yes, it's one label kind of showcasing, but absolutely. And that's just, I mean, this is the world that we live in. Do you object?
I'm split. I think it should have its own separate category. I think it should be, best compilation or soundtrack, whatever it might be, because I don't think that I don't think it's a fair fight. Basically, it's like taking the NBA All Star team and putting it up against, like, the great contender out of the West, the East, whatever it is. I think it's just different. Um, and so, yeah, I would prefer to keep it more pure and have it be, artists against artists. But it's interesting. We'll see how it stacks up this year. So next up for me is one that should be no surprise to anyone, in that we have both gone on record saying that we think it's the best album of 2021 so far, and that is J. Cole's The Off Season. This is a big one, one of hip hop's, 2010s Mount Rushmore MCs. There's a lot of controversy, a lot of IG, contests going around where people have got. And there's one for a Mount Rushmore for Atlanta. I just saw floating around, but there's one recently for the MCs of the 2010s, and it had Drake, J. Cole, and Kendrick, and I think there was a fourth spot to figure out who should go to. Jake and I said that was Travis Scott. But Cole is 100% on that Mount Rushmore, so for him to release an album is a big deal. We had not heard an album from Cole, a full album, since 2018's KOD. He was on Revenge of the Dreamers 3 that Jake just referenced. A couple tracks. Not He didn't have a ton of presence on that,
Mm-hmm.
so it didn't feel like a Cole album at all to me. But this one came with a lot of anticipation. He only gave us a week's notice that it was coming out, although unbeknownst to us, we had heard one of the songs, The Climb Back, almost a year before this came out as part of a three-pack that Cole released summer of 2020. But this one, Cole released a tweet saying, new album coming in a week. He then put out a documentary, 12 minutes on YouTube, which he tends to do, just kind of giving us a setup for what the mode was, the mentality was. He was in mixtape mode in the sense that he went back to his classic, the warm up mixtape, to find the hunger, almost like Rocky Four. He went back to Russia, and trained in, like, dungeons and basements and stuff like that. Just really wanting to outdo himself. He got up every day writing and was just really, really in the zone for that. And then he did an LA Leakers freestyle, which showed us that he was not playing. Two different beats, murdered it. I still think the best freestyle of 2021 so far. And that was pretty much his rollout. Not a ton of stuff. And then he released Interlude the day before, which was one of the tracks from the album, as a kind of like what we thought was the first single before we saw the full track list. So general themes about this, I think it's Cole in mixtape shape. I've said already in our review that I think this is a mixtape in disguise. That is not in any way a knock on the quality. It's more a statement of the mentality and the aggressiveness and what Cole is trying to convey about his status of as an MC, not having any cares in the world about radio singles, just really in it for the purity of the music and for what he loves. So that's what I mean by being in mixtape mode. He covers wide ranging topics on it, everything from Black Lives Matter issues on Prelude to being a father on, Let Go My Hand, and wanting his damn respect too. He's like saying, listen, all this chatter about like me maybe and arguably and all that other stuff needs to go. Like I'm that guy, period. And he also flexes a lot of new flows. We saw this on KOD. He started introducing new flows over different styles of production. He continues that on this, and never does he lose himself or sound like he's chasing trends. Instead, he's taking current sounds of the moment and putting a stamp on it. So, really, just I think an awesome showcase for just how talented Cole is as an MC. Features, typically this would be a very short section of the album review because Cole has not had features for quite some time, but he actually opens back up. He talks about it in his documentary Applying Pressure. He says, do I really want to go down in history as a dude who never rapped with anyone? No, that's not who I am, you know. And you know, he proved that by going on a flurry of features with MCs where he ate everybody's lunch just about when he was on the tracks, and he invited people to join him on this album. One of whom was 21 Savage. They had a incredible collabo called A Lot from 21's album, and he
Grammy
and Cole,
nominated.
Grammy nominated, yeah. And he and Cole just sound amazing. Boss from the Dreamville camp is on the album. Cameron, Lil Baby, and Black. So those are just a few of the features. Very wide ranging. You know, a lot of names I don't think many people expect, like Lil Baby or or Black. But you know, Cole never ever wanted to be put in a box. Production, Cole does produce some of the beats, but he hands the reins over from time to time too, as he did on KOD, and I think he benefits from it. He's got Boy Wonder there, Timbaland, Jake One, Tay Beast, T Minus, DJ Dahi, and more. Key tracks for me are 95 South. He starts it off right away, letting people know, listen, I'm not here to play. He's got Cameron almost serving as his hype man, really just talking about how the game is like in trouble and they need Cole and like he's coming. My Life, which is his collabo with 21 Savage, continues their streak of just demolishing soulful beats. You know, I think these two need to make a collabo album together. They sound that good. And just like Benny and in Fat Joe, it's not a pairing that you would expect to work. But that's why, as they say, we play the game. That's why we play the track, because when you hit play on it, they just sound great together. 100 Mil is a song that I keep in steady rotation. Very, very inspiring. It's the theme is basically no matter what your level of success, stay hungry and grind. You know, Top Dog from TDE has told me personally, and I've heard him say it in interviews too, the way that he keeps himself and his artist sharp is to say, hustle like you broke at all times, right? Never ever lose that hunger. And that's what Cole is doing on 100 Mil. And then Let Go of My Hand is, I think, the dopest song on the album, just thematically. And it's got him talking about fatherhood and revisiting his own childhood and seeing things in his son that he wants to improve upon, and seeing his son grow up and like imagining like what that's going to be like when he doesn't need him anymore. He talks very candidly about an altercation he had with Puff Daddy at the VMAs back in 2014, 2015. I can't remember the exact year. But then has and a boss move has Puff actually talk on the outro to let everyone know that that is squashed and that's not a thing. And so just really really dope. Just showcases J. Cole at his finest. But if you want to hear more about that one, Jake and I did an entire like 40-45 minutes to the album in a previous episode, so you can find that on our channel. But yeah, that's Cole, man.
You see the Instagram this week of the two of them squaring up, Puffy and
Nah,
Cole,
that's dope. That's
making light of it. I loved it. I thought, and J. Cole is not a social media dude. So it was extra funny. And I love that. And I love the fact that they can make light of something and also talk about it. And I was mistaken. I said Grammy nominated. Grammy winning collaboration a lot, which is you and I covered on the site, was Cole's first Grammy, which is a travesty. Um, so you had said that we both agreed, and I stand by that the off season was the best album of the year. There's an album, and it's the only one on our list that's not out yet, but it will be soon, and I think it is my new album of the year. Cole is right neck and neck, and I love that, and that makes for fun with whatever else comes out, and we'll have this discussion again, Lord willing, in 6 months. But shout out to Evidence, from Dilated Peoples and Step Brothers fame. he has an album coming out later this month, with June 25th, June
Yep, June
26th,
25th. Yep.
called The Unlearning Volume 1. And, Evidence, in 2007, which feels like yesterday and makes me feel old as could be, started his solo series with the Weatherman LP. And that series eventually hit 3 albums. There was the Weatherman LP, there was Cats or Dogs in 2013, after he moved as a solo artist, as did Dilated to Rhymesayers Entertainment. And then in 2018, he did Whether or Not, which won among the AFH readers as Album of the Year. And it's so interesting because 21 years ago, 22 years ago, I was a huge Dilated Peoples fan. Again, it's one of those, like, were they underground? I think they represented that movement, but they were also signed to Capitol. But there was that really interesting time in LA where you had Jurassic 5, Dilated Peoples, the Living Legends, AC Alone, and a lot of the Freestyle Fellowship and Project Blowed guys were making moves. Planet Asia, out of Fresno, was signed to Interscope. It was just a really, really interesting time. And Dilated was one of my favorite groups. And I looked at them, and I remember when Ev went solo first, and started putting out separate stuff. I was a little skeptical because I love the group that much. And what's so interesting to me is Dilated is incredibly consistent. At this point, it seems like, every 5 years or so, they come out with another album. But I would venture to say that Ev has made his solo catalog, even more enduring. And, after an 11-year block in there of being the Weatherman, he closed the book on that a few years ago. He announced that he would, and told us as much when we spoke to him in 2018 at the top of the year. But he comes with a new series, and this to me is very much a pandemic album. I feel like Ev, kind of reapproached everything, and we have some inside intel. I won't say too much on that, but we know a little bit about the making of this album, and it really shows in the results. It's very, very personal, very it has those aphorisms that Evidence drops where he is Mr. Slow Flow. Him and Parrish Smith both mastered that. But in going and rapping slowly, he says so much, and there are so many quotables in this album. And he also deviated from a lot of the things that I feel like his fans have expected from an Evidence album. So, even though the album's not out, but I think 4 or 5 singles are, the track listing is. So as far as guests, you have Boldy James, you have Navy Blue, who's another artist that's been working with Alchemist as well, and Earl Sweatshirt and those guys. You have Fly Anakin out of, I believe, Richmond, Virginia, who is on our playlist, having an incredible year. I have Conway the Machine. Ev has always worked with kind of the Griselda guys, and really, stood the ground long before they had their come up. And you also have an artist named Merkage Dave on there on the featured tip. And as far as production, I mean, it's interesting. Again, like in the early Dilated days, you had some incredible Alchemist beats. You had Muggs, you had, I think he's Swift, Cutmaster Kurt. They had all of these amazing producers working around them. Evidence, I mean, obviously he's gone on to produce some incredible stuff for Raekwon and, I believe Prodigy, if I'm not mistaken, and a host of folks in the industry. Ev's production has gotten as sharp as his lyricism. So he produces a bulk of the album. There's one Alchemist beat. You have Knots on there, Seb Bash, and then he worked in tandem with a lot of the guys that you'll see, really staking their claim in the quote unquote underground. So Mr. Green, Animos, V-Don, you have Derringer, also of the Griselda family, and Eardrum, and a producer named Q3. I find this album to be incredible, relatable. It's one of those joints you can put on, especially if you're alone or you're driving somewhere, and it's unskippable for me. And I really, in the same way that J. Cole is, I really, really value that. And Ev's pouring his heart out. I mean, for those that listen to Whether or Not, he addressed the loss of his partner and the mother of his child. He addressed a lot of kind of the angst and the pain in his life. This does not deviate from that. And I think Ev takes big liberties, with himself. It's a very, very courageous album, and addresses just how damaging loss can be, and also the responsibilities of being a father, of being an artist, of being a successful artist, but not necessarily um, treated to the degree that I think Evidence should. I firmly believe that this should be a Grammy nominated album, based on what we know, and the deadline is approaching before the end of the year. And after 2020, we saw, Ev's brother Alchemist and Freddie Gibbs, and we saw Royce the 5'9" and D Smoke, three independent artists contend for that. I would really, really like to see this album get some greater consideration. So, of three songs that I want to spotlight, I'll begin with one that's out, and there's a video too of All of That Said with Boldy James. I just these guys have worked together several times over the years. I think that it's a phenomenal track, and you take two artists that might rap about different things, and they find a great overlap on how to speak to the listener. And the beat is just insane. It's easily my most played hip hop song of 2021, and it just came out, so that says a lot. The other joint, and I know you like this one, Reggie, is Tailor Made Suit, which is a really powerful song. And I won't say too much, but when the album's out, I encourage everyone to listen to that. I think it speaks to that courage I referenced a moment ago. And then Lost in Time, Park Jams, where you see Ev really wax the slow flow, and he does so on a sample loop. I think it's a sample loop that just, it extracts the emotion out of you. And he just has so many quotables in that song alone. I could go on, but this album is really something special. And to watch an artist that was dope 20 years ago ascend in this way is really really, really impressive to me.
Yeah, that's why we say so far whenever we talk about an album being the best of the year, because
Yeah.
you never know what's going to drop. I gotta agree with you. Having listened to this album like 10 to 15 times, for me, that and Cole are neck and neck. For best one, Vine, and it's two very different albums. Actually, they're very similar in some ways. It's two elite MCs, showcasing their amazing skills at just double entendres and just sharp lyricism and painting, vivid metaphors with their words. Also, both deeply personal, but the
Yeah.
way that they flip those styles is very different. The selections are very different too, and so it's interesting. The underlying like bigger themes are there, but sonically they could not sound more different in my opinion.
It's wild too, because they're two MC producers, and they competed in 2018. I mean, with KOD, and whether or not, I mean, I think that might have been the final round in our user voted battle. So it's interesting to watch these two guys, for you and me, be neck and neck yet again.
Yeah, and so on top of that, Jake and I are going to be having a conversation with Evidence that we will feature next week. I'm really looking forward to that. It's always a great, really thoughtful interviewee. So that should be an amazing conversation. So I'm going to go back and clean up the record. So we got 14 albums that we are going to discuss. We were going to kick it off with albums that we agreed upon. I thought we were agreed upon one, but it turns out we're not, and that's Judas and the Black Messiah. So that's one that I'm going to advocate for, but it's not made Jake's list, so I'm not going to put music in his mouth. So yeah, so we are only at 6 so far, right? No, 5 so far that we agree upon.
Yeah. Okay.
Number 6, and I think you agree on this, is Benny's Griselda brother, Conway the Machine. Conway put out an album called La Maquina. The Griselda guys will put out anywhere from 3 to 4 projects per year. And they're always good, but some stand out above the others. For me, this is Conway's best album so far. I know there are others out there who might disagree, but I think it's just amazing from top to bottom, and it really kind of propels Conway to a different level. This is his kind of coming out party, in my opinion, similar to the way that Plugs I Met was for Benny. And also, he's combining it with his his gravitating more toward mainstream artists without in any way compromising his sound. I'll say that generally, I think he might be the most underrated of Griselda. I think that Gunn has got the image, the fly guy, like the whole persona. He's the guy behind the whole movement. Got a marketing mind. Voice is clearly distinctive. I think he stands out among all MCs, not just the Griselda MCs. Benny, through like just like grit and guile, has fought to become um, what I think a lot of people view as the kind of lead MC of the group. But Machine, he'll say all the time he's the most lyrical, and I don't think you can argue against that after listening to this album. He really establishes that. On top of being the most lyrical, he also has deeply personal songs, like all the time. He puts his heart and soul into his music, and so I really really love listening to him. And this album is the one where he shows that he can rhyme with anyone, using any style over any type of beat. So the features, he's got 2 Chainz. You don't think of Griselda and 2 Chainz, but again, these guys are doing a really great job of very intentionally expanding their brand. It harkens back to what you and I were talking about earlier about the AFH brand, when to keep it flexible, not being put into a box. And so sometimes that requires doing things that are unanticipated, stretching people's expectations of what your brand means, and he does that masterfully. He's got JID, Ludacris, so a really like a smorgasbord of Atlanta MCs. And Atlanta, anyone who's honest, Atlanta has ruled hip hop for 10 years now, maybe 12 years, or maybe 15 years. It's been a long time that Atlanta has ruled hip hop.
And Griselda set up shop there. I mean, people associate them with Buffalo, but they've been based in Atlanta, like their operations for, at least 5 years.
Oh wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so he's going straight at it, and then he's got West Side Gun and Benny, of course, and then others. Production, typically, the Griselda guys are Derringer, Alchemist, people like that, but he really expands. He's got Bangladesh, Cardiac, Cosmo Beats, Murder Beats, Q Beats. He does have one track from Alchemist, which I'll get to. Key tracks, one is KD, for Kevin Durant. He spits what I think is a triplet flow over a trap beat. It's like, what in the world? Like Conway's doing that, and he sounds absolutely amazing. It's a mic drop moment for an elite MC, and I think it should be called VC, because it's like Vince Carter in the dunk contest. Like Kenny Smith said, it's over. It's over. Like he killed it, man. Next track is Scatterbrain. Again, featured on the playlist. This is a really like it's almost like a soundtrack you'd hear like in a kids movie or like a scary kids movie. Like just got this eerie like kids singing, and he goes toe to toe with Ludacris and JID, two of Atlanta's finest lyricists. And it's over a trap beat too. He brings it to their home court and serves it up, man. It's just really amazing. And I love hearing elite MCs going bar for bar against one another, and it's clear that each guy kind of brought their A game for this and was like definitely trying to take home the win. So that one was dope. I think the track of the album for me is 200 Pies, and that's an Alchemist beat, a typical dark, soulful, like spooky Alchemist beat, like with those those piano chords and like real high, like singing, high pitched singing, like in a real spooky way. And it's him and 2 Chainz, and Chainz just sounds amazing, man. Like he did the two of them. Like it's again another one of these pairings that you don't expect to work on paper. That's great, and we should just make a playlist of that. But like it's just amazing, and this song has been one of my most listened to songs of the year, 200 Pies. So I think this is a great album for La Maquina, but we agree on this one, right?
I do. And it's funny, though. I want to say one thing. I 100% agree on this album. I got to say my 2 favorite Conway joints of 2021 are not on this album, which I think is not a knock on the album, but it's a tout of Conway. Kill All Rats on. He put out another album this year with Big Ghost called "If It Bleeds, You Can Kill It," and then he did another Lucy with JID called Ballads, which I believe is on the playlist too, if I'm not mistaken. And that's like I play that joint all the time too. So Conway, ever prolific, but I to answer your question one more time, yes, this belongs on our list, and we do agree.
Word, word.
Do you want to go into the next album that we agree on before we diverge, or do you want me to kick one of those?
Yeah, no. All right, if you want to be even, no. Yeah, go ahead. Do one that. Nah, let's do one. Let's do the one that we agree on, and then let's get to the debate.
Sounds good. Oh, we can do. Do you want me to do it or you?
Oh, wait a minute. Which one are we on?
X.
Oh yeah. I'm doubling up. You know what?
I fucked the whole thing up.
Nah, it's cool. It's cool. You go ahead. You go ahead. You do one that
Okay.
you a wild card.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm gonna go with one. This is a veteran that I'm advocating heavy for this year. Up until Evidence and Cole, this was probably my most listened to album. I'm gonna give it up to my man Devin Copeland, aka Devin the Dude with Soulful Distance. One thing I want to say about Devin is I look at him a lot like a Too Short or an Ice-T. I think Devin has fans out there that really operate off of 2 or 3 songs, and that disappoints me because Devin has done so much with so little. And what I mean by that is he's, as far as I know, always been an independent artist. Yes, he was a priority artist at Rap A Lot Records for, at least 10 years. But Devin has never gotten the machine behind him. Even when he was working with Dr. Dre, when he was working with DJ Premier, when he was Scarface's, true, understudy pupil, it never seemed to work in Devin's favor. And, that being said, he's been able to cultivate a long-lasting, really incredible career. And just like the Griselda guys, just like so many artists right now, he's incredibly prolific. So in January of this year, I believe it was January, he put out Soulful Distance. As you can gather, the title speaks to what was going on in the world. And for an artist like Devin, who, regularly travels around the country, and does shows and bars and clubs, it was a sit-down album. And it really carries itself off in the music. And, like I made my point about the Too Short or Ice-T thing, I think that Devin is one of those pioneering artists that really balanced melody and singing with rapping early on. Long before Drake, long before Kid Cudi, long before Pick a Rapper, Devin could kick a verse and then just easily slide into singing. And it's a very nostalgic 70s R&B, sometimes bluesy thing, but it makes for a self-contained album in a really nice way. And that's what you get here. So, it's a pandemic album from a 50-year-old. Devin once told me he raps about 3 things. It's all W's: women, wine, and weed. And while that might be true, I think that Devin shines when he's rapping about the life in between those. He raps, a song you and I both like from him, Doobie Ashtray. Sure, it's a song about weed, but it's also a song about going through life, and having those moments. So you get those on this album. I'll talk about some songs in a second. But in the way of features, you have Scarface on here, who, not so long ago vowed that he was retiring from album making. Scarface comes back. Big Pokey, Houston legend. Lil Kiki, another Houston legend. Slim Thug. And then you get the Odd Squad guys, Jug Mug and Blind Rob, who fans of Rap A Lot back in the day will remember as Robbo. You have Tony Mac and 14K on here as well. I don't know who's producing this album. One of the travesties of the streaming era is if the label doesn't put up the production credits, we don't know. What I suspect is Devin is, a multi-threat. I imagine that he produced a lot of this himself. It's coming out on his label through Empire. But on the song level, he's got a joint in here called Discouraged, which is one of my favorite songs. And while it sounds melancholic, it's not. It's just Devin sitting down, looking at the world at large. And he's such a good rapper. Very conversational, very deft with the cadence. Devin makes music that you can just put on, clean the house, drive somewhere, and I just feel as though his profile, especially in the media, doesn't get the recognition it deserves. Another joint is called To Each Their Own. This kind of looks at exactly what I'm saying. Devin looking at himself, at his career, what he's been able to build without so much of the fanfare that a lot of artists get. And then the other joint is Live and Let Live, which examines a lot of what was going on in the streets, as far as protests, police brutality, throughout time, but really in recent years. And that's the joint with Slim Thug and Scarface. And all three of those MCs rap at a really strong level, and they complement each other really well. And you talk about West Side Gun and voice. I mean, Devin has a phenomenal voice. Slim Thug was always one of my favorite artists of the Houston movement, and he's got such a great booming vocal. And then come on now, Brad Jordan. I mean, we have one of the goats making a meaningful appearance about a substantial issue. I just really ride for this album, and it's one that's not on our playlist, at least of the moment. But I this is the album that I've texted a lot of my friends, and I'm like, you need to check out. And they've gotten back to me and been like, yeah, this one's a joint. And so yeah.
Word, I always loved Devin. My introduction to him was later, although a long time ago now. It was on 2001, which is insanely enough 22 years ago.
Yeah, man.
But even that was kind of late in his career for those who are really down with him. So yeah, man. All right, so the last one we agree upon is DMX Exodus. We did a deep dive on this one not too long ago, also, and so you can check that out. I think we spoke about X for about 45 minutes or so. So I'll cover this one briefly, but generally, some of the things that are great about this album for me are one, it fully represents DMX's vision. The whole thing was recorded and completed um, under X's supervision, with Swiss Beats being the executive producer before he passed away. The only exception is there was a song that had Pop Smoke on it, and unfortunately, the verse was used elsewhere before this album was put out, and so they replaced him with Moneybag Yo. Um, but I'm not sure in listening to it that it would have made a difference for me, at least, because that's probably my least favorite song on the project. I think it showcases the many sides of DMX. Like, Swiss Beats was on an interview in the Breakfast Club, and he was talking about how he never understood the Tupac and DMX comparison. He doesn't see any similarities
Hmm.
other than they were both bald and like,
Love to take their shirt off.
yeah, yeah, basically. He didn't see. For me, though, I think it's about the subject matter that they covered. Both of those guys would do anything. I actually once made a Tupac cassette called "From the Profane to the Profound,"
Hmm.
and side one was the profane. It's Tupac's talking about like liquor and women and weed and all the stuff that you were saying. Devin talks about, but then Tupac can also talk about politics. He talked about his deepest feelings. He talked about like respect for women, like a lot of different things. And I think the DMX has multiple sides like that too. He has a very tough, aggressive side. He also has a very vulnerable side, one that is not afraid to acknowledge his flaws and struggles and ways he's trying to better himself in life. And so I think that he and Pac share that at a core level. And this album showcases all those sides of X really well. The last thing is that, it's interesting. Maybe I need to go back a little bit on my comments about compilation albums and soundtracks, because when you think about it, this is a very star-studded album. It's just wall to wall. I think only one or two songs don't have features on it. And so, if I'm going to talk about a fair fight, what's a fair fight, right? Should it just be one artist like Cole's previous albums, or but if you got 20 different superstars, why not compete against a superstar album like Judas and the Black Messiah or Khrysis? So maybe I'll take that back. But this one is star-studded. Production is Swiss Beats on all the tracks. He's got some co-production, some with Era Music and others. Features on the album are The Locks, Jay-Z, Nas, West Side Gun, Conway, and Benny from Griselda, Lil Wayne, Alicia Keys, Snoop Dogg, Bono, Usher, and more. He's got some of his kids on it too. Like, this is really, really stacked. Key tracks for me: Bath Salts. This is a song that was leaked in early 2017 in a beat battle between Swiss Beats and Just Blaze. The version that we heard online back then had some bars from Jadakiss too. On the official version, it only has Jay, Nas, and DMX, but only is a ridiculous word to use to, think about three of like hip hop's biggest all on one track. And everyone clearly aware what the stakes were. Nas reportedly went back and rewrote some of his, not out of fear, but because he had used some of those lyrics elsewhere in the 4 years. Jay left his as was, and obviously X's was as he had recorded it too. But really, really great. Um, and then there's Hood Blues with Griselda, fantastic sample. Loot Pack had used it. X and that is just Griselda. It's perfect in its execution of fusing old and new generations together on a track both could relate to. My only gripe is that X's vocals could have been clearer. This one he did at the Griselda studio with the guys, and it sounded like they had had a day of like of partying, and X's vocals just weren't as sharp as they were in other places on the album. Take Control is another favorite of mine. That's a song with him and Snoop Dogg, just absolutely murdering a Marvin Gaye sample. I think the best use of a Marvin Gaye sample since Eric Sermon's Music, and like that one, really an extensive use. It's almost like Marvin is singing the hook on on the track instead of it just being a sample, and it just sounds amazing. X starts it off saying this is about to be some sexy shit, and it definitely is. And then the last track is Letter to My Son, Call Your Father. This song is a deeply personal song where DMX talks about the struggles he's had in his relationship with his oldest son, and kind of explains his actions and intents to his son, understanding he's not perfect, and really just articulating some of the difficulties they had. One of the most powerful and personal songs I've ever heard from DMX, and that says a lot given the MC that he is. And a really fitting way to close the last album of his career, in my opinion. So yeah, that's X for me.
Yeah, man, I cannot think of an album as meaningful as DMX's Exodus this year. I think we mentioned Cole, we mentioned Evidence as two of our favorites, but I think on a magnitude level, this is the last word from DMX. So one of the most recent albums to make our list, and you and I have not, I mean, full disclosure, you and I have not even had a chance to talk about this album together until
Yeah.
now, is All the Brilliant Things, which is the latest solo album from Skyzoo.
Wait,
And
and let's just clarify. So right now we got seven that we've agreed upon, right? We got Benny and Harry, we got
mhm.
Evidence, we got Madlib, we got J. Cole, we got DMX, and we got Conway.
And Khrysis, right?
Um, and Khrysis, right? And
That's
Khrysis.
seven. And Conway.
And we
That
got two. We got two that we've discussed that we haven't agreed upon yet, and
yep.
that's Judas and the Black Messiah, and Devin the Dude.
Yeah.
So now we're getting into the great debate. So we got our seven. We got three to fill. We got two already. We've talked about. The third is now Droog. So all the brilliant things. Yep.
Yeah, we've got a few to discuss real quick.
Yeah.
And so getting back to Sky, I mean, this sounds almost like a cliche, but Sky is an artist that I truly believe has gotten better with time. He first popped up on my radar around 2005, 2006, right around the time he started working with Ninth Wonder, if I'm not mistaken. Sky was a flagship artist of the Jamla, and there was another label that Ninth was running with in the early days. And then he really has stepped out and created his own movement. But in the last 2 or 3 years, You know, Sky is somebody who's made our year-end list twice in a row. 2018, he partnered with, 2019, he partnered with Pete Rock for Retropolitan. Phenomenal album. You and I, we had a great conversation with Sky and Pete. And then last year, he released two projects. One was a joint with a live jazz band called The Bluest Note, and that made our year-end list. And then he also made a song called Milestones, which was, I mean, and these projects of last year were a little bit, shorter, but they were very thematic, as Sky is one of those artists who's an expert at concept. And it was a father and son album. Sky, his son's name's Miles, and I believe his own name might be Miles as well. I know he goes by Skylar as well. So boom, right into this year, all the brilliant things. Another album that does not veer from concept. I think that you would be hard pressed to find an artist who has repped Brooklyn as hard, especially in the last 15 years as Skyzoo. He grew up, just literally steps from where Biggie's from. He has paid great homage to Jay-Z, to Spike Lee, to the heroes of his borough, of his community. But also in recent years, Sky's admitted that in order to raise a family the way that he wants to, in order to sustain the career and the lifestyle that he wants to, he had to leave New York. He makes his home, I believe, outside of Atlanta or in Atlanta. And Sky, this is very much a love letter to Brooklyn from, these are my words, but a displaced citizen, somebody who is saddened by the gentrification and the changing makeup of such a beautiful place and a historic place to Black people and to people of color. So it's another album with Mellow Music Group. You made the comparison 6 years ago, I want to say, that Mellow was in a position to be, the new Raucous. As we watch veterans, working with the label and redefining their careers, I think that was a very prophetic statement. Skyzoo went there years ago to work with Apollo Brown and has seemingly stayed around ever since. So this is a great album. And on the feature side, Sky has, made some incredible features. He's brought in some top lyrical peers. He's made collaborative albums with people in the past. This one, he primarily goes outside of hip hop. He does have Ill Al Scratch on there, which is dope. And again, you want to talk about, singing, rapping pioneers of walking that line. But he also has, Raheem Devon, BJ the Chicago Kid, Black Soul, the Hypnotic Brass Ensemble, who's worked with Master Ace before, and other people, Ziolin, Aria, and then the scratches are by DJ Shakim. On the production tip, some of the same folks that you're seeing work with a lot of movers and shakers. J.R. Swifts, who's done a lot of stuff with the Griselda guys and Rome Streets, he's on here. J57 from Brown Bag All Stars, and Kenny Keys, Thelonious Martin, Zarek Beats, I hope I'm saying this right, Mark Nidit, Karl Marx, not to be confused with the other Karl Marx, Mark 31, Stolen Drums, Rashid Hadi, and Twame. I hope I'm getting those names right. I think it's dope that Sky can make a really top level album with some names that you or I might be new to. And then key tracks that kind of, prove my point. One of the singles that he put out ahead of the album is called Bed-Stuy is Burning, and that's with the Hypnotic Brass Band or Brass Ensemble. And just a phenomenal exercise in looking at where Brooklyn is at, in 2021, and Sky looking back at what his neighborhood means to him and what it's happening now. And the chorus is, New Orleans, Philly, don't let this happen to you. And yeah, I mean, that's just been a joint that's been extremely resonant with me. Even as somebody who has lived in a neighborhood now longer than I've lived anywhere, watching developers come in and change it and what that means for the people. The album opens with another highlight called Free Jewels. And this might, as I share that about my neighborhood, Sky makes this amazing illustration of the people that are reviewing and writing about hip hop music today are living in his building at a much higher rate than, or in his neighborhood, so to speak, at a much higher rent rate than most people that grew up there can afford. And they're making the music that the critics are reviewing. And I thought that was just such a heavy point. And then also he has another song that I think is really fascinating and again speaks to Sky's level of concept. The name of the song is I Was Supposed to Be a Trap Rapper. And it speaks for itself, but Sky talks about how growing up in Brooklyn, being in the periphery of all these movers and shakers and folks dealing in the streets, how easy it would have been for him to maybe be like a Mano, or maybe be like a Uncle Murder, or even a 6ix9ine. I mean, I'm using Brooklyn names, but instead he had this, fascination and love for hip hop and its core tenets, and he loved Dilla beats. So he chose the path that he did. And while he walks those lines, one could argue that, it might have been more profitable in the short run if he would have been this other thing. And I just think it's a great self-examination. I don't want to sample snitch on this one, but it's a sample that hip hop heads will absolutely recognize. It's classic. And then at the end of the song, he breaks into a trap flow. You talk about the triplets, and Sky is one of those nimble lyricists that can do anything. And I just think it's a really, really good joint. And I'm about 5 or 6 listens in on this one. There's 2 albums that dropped this week that we're going to talk about, this being one. And we're figuring this one out, but I think it deserves to be in this conversation.
Yeah, man. Sky has been incredibly consistent over the years. This album reminds me a lot of an album that you and I loved a few years back. Not necessarily sonically, but thematically and in terms of the quality. And that's A Brooklyn Story by Master Ace, as you mentioned, and Marco Polo. Very, very similar themes. Their own love letter, from guys a little bit further along on the journey than Sky is, but really, really great. And so, yeah, I've enjoyed this, man. I've listened to it quite a bit. The other album you alluded to, which I'll get into next, is your old Droog's Time. Droog, another guy, man. So I can't remember what year it was, maybe 6, 7 years ago. There was a tape, a mixtape that came out, and everyone thought it was Nas basically trolling. Your old Droog means your old friend. I think, and Droog is Russian, I believe.
Ukrainian. Yeah.
Ukrainian. Okay. And so, you know, that had people like paying attention in a huge way. And then, Drew showed that he's Drew, he's not Nas. And, but he had a lot of attention, a lot of buzz around him at that time because of that. And that was an incredible mixtape. Since then, he's put out a lot of really cool concept albums. Um, you know, he's always one to paint very vivid like descriptions with his words. A lot of like insider New York type conversation. Embraces all aspects of his life. Just really and goes at. He's one who'll go at the media also. You mentioned Skyzoo going at the media in some of his songs. Drew pulls no punches with going at people. He'll name names. He'll name like companies, like all that. He's fearless. So this showcases all of that. He's always really consistent. Got really witty punchlines and great storytelling. So he said about this album in a statement, "This is basically my debut album. Some of this material was recorded back in 2017, but I suppose the universe felt it would make more sense if it was released at another point in the future, hence the name Time." I thought that was really interesting, because something about it felt different to me. It did feel like, you know, um, like a cut above even the stuff that he's done, in terms of like quality. And that's not a knock at all on the other stuff because it's all good. This
We
is
had him on the album list last year.
yeah, absolutely. It's really just celebrating just even the strides of this one. He continues to get better, in my opinion. Some of the key features on this album, he's got MF Doom. Doom tracks have been surfacing, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in this episode. But they've been surfacing here and there, and this is a really good one. Aesop Rock is on it. Elzai, Blue, Mick Jenkins, and an artist that I had not heard before, Wiki, but whose voice really stood out to me on this one. This one is so fresh that I couldn't find any production credits. I looked at a lot of different sites and reviews and things like that, but they're not out yet. This was a surprise album. No one knew it was coming, and so it's going to take a little while. I often say the internet is undefeated, but in this case, it is defeated. But I'm sure it'll come back in a rematch, and we'll be able to update this in the future. Key tracks for me are Dropout Boogie. That's the song with Doom. Um, it's another one of what is likely the last few Doom verses, and um, you know, it's two different beats. Very similar, but like there's a switch up for Doom, and it's great. Droog's beats are very unorthodox. And this one is a great one. Lost Time is a phenomenal soul sample. You know, Droog is painting all sorts of vivid details about everything from eating Chinese food to listening to KRS-One. You just never know the direction he's going to go in, which is what keeps it like interesting. A lot of MCs are cliche and talk about the same things. And we talked about that a little bit earlier. Drew just never know where he's going to go with it. And then Field of Dreams in one move, I'll talk about together two posse cuts that are back to back on the album. The first has got Elzai and Aesop Rock, and the second has got Blue and Mick Jenkins. Um, these remind me of almost like Eastern Conference All Stars, a song that Pete Rock and Skyzoo did with Elzai and Griselda. Where it's just like just elite MCs in this connoisseur rap genre. Just giving it everything, and for Drew to pull these guys together and have it back to back is really dope. I think the track that stands out the most for me though is "Please Listen to My Tape," which is a reference to EPMD's "Please Listen to My Demo." It's Drew recalling basically his journey as an MC in his career, and he's super honest about it. He talks about how he taught he and I won't name names, although he does. He met with certain ARs, and they told him that his sound was dated, and that he needed to listen to X track and Y track to figure out what was current. He talks about the opportunities that he had to sign with major labels and why he turned those down. He talks about the fact that when he was really buzzing, I think it was 2013 or so, with that mixtape, he had an opportunity to sign some really big deals, and his management encouraged they stay independent. And it seems like he might lament that a little bit. There's a lot to unpack, and I got to listen to it a few more times, but really raw, honest, self-assessment, and just showcases why Droog is so special. So I think
That's my favorite song on the album too. And I think Keeping It Family, I mean, in recent, this is Droog's second project this year. He put out one earlier with the God Fahim, and Droog has been running with two other MC producers lately. Fahim being one, and when I say lately, I mean the last 2 or 3 years, and Mach-Hommy being another. And folks that have been following the Griselda movement longer than I have may have known of Mach-Hommy for some time. He popped on my radar somewhere around 2017, 2018. But he's another elusive artist. And he put out an album this year called Pray for Haiti. And there's a lot of context to this album. So Mach-Hommy is a New Jersey artist, producer, MC of Haitian descent, often covers his face with the Haitian flag or the Haiti flag. And he's been around for a while. And I didn't know this, but I dug into some interviews. He had shot some videos for like Huss Kingpin and eventually Griselda in the mid 2010s. Eventually Griselda, here's what he's doing on the mic side, and wanted to use their platform at a time when it was evolving into what we now see to present it to the world. And one of his real breakthrough projects was called HBO, which stands for Haitian Body Odor. And Mach-Hommy, very much like Wu-Tang Clan with the Once Upon a Time in Shaolin, or like Nipsey Hussle with the Crenshaw tape, he's really advocated for the value of physical music and to show artists that they're more than just a $9.99 monthly subscription. So in the case of like HBO, he pressed up 187 copies. I believe of CD, it might have been a vinyl, and charged $300 for them. and his product has sold out. So he's been an artist with a huge aura around him for at least 3 or 4 years. Cryptically, you'll see these photos hit the internet of him in Rick Rubin's studio in Malibu. You'll see him having a meal with Jay-Z, covering his face the whole time. There was a photo, I believe, of him and Dr. Dre. Drake, when this album that we're about to talk about dropped, posted about it on Instagram. Like, Mach-Hommy is a quote unquote underground independent artist who is somehow on the radar of the highest 1%ers of music. And that's really interesting because when you get to his music, it is absolutely connoisseur rap. It is very dense, a lot of wisdom there, and a lot of just unconventionality. Like, he's a very dense poet, but he only gives you what he wants you to know. There's references to things that I think really stand the test of time. Like, he doesn't get caught up in the here and now a lot. I think when this album dropped, you took to it more than I have. I know our colleague Justin Hunt really got behind it as well. And then we've, for me, I've been listening more and more. So in the way of key tracks, and I should say, there was a period of time where Mac just went and did it himself. There was a falling out with Griselda. It wasn't the most high profile beef, so to speak, although there's headlines on the internet that would lead you to suggest otherwise. But on Christmas Day last year in 2020, Mac, God Fahim, who had his own history with Griselda, and West Side Gun posted a photo together. I believe it was outside of Four Seasons Hotel. I believe it's Atlanta, that they were good. And so it's been really interesting to see this year, everything kind of happened according to plan, but 5 or 6 years later, where Griselda has come in and presented this album that marks a return of sorts, but Mac accomplished everything he did on his own. Griselda accomplished everything that they've done over the last 3 or 4 years, but they're still fulfilling this destiny and this mutual relationship, which I think is really interesting. So Gun is on the album. Fahim is on the album. Keisha Plum, who any Griselda listener knows very well, is on the album, and Melanie Charles. And then on the production tip, you've got DJ Green Lantern, who has always been in the Griselda corner. You've got Camouflage Monk, Messiah Music, CG, Conductor Williams, Nicholas Craven, who's been a very prolific producer, especially this year, and Denny LaFleur. The songs that really stood out to me is Blockchain, which is literally 86 seconds long, and it finds like a very much like Motown-y sample beat, and Mach just going in, just going off the rails with, a lot of imagery, really deft cadences. It's a one verser. And again, that's what I'm saying when I say an artist that defies convention. I mean, this album represented such a coming out party to him by virtue of the Griselda cosign, but Mac doesn't deviate from what he's always done. The other joint is I'll say Mary, but it could be Marie. And the reason I say Mary is it plays into Hail Mary. Slow beat. It's on our playlist, and it has a phenomenal chorus with an artist that just kicks some really intricate knowledge. And it's interesting to see an artist like this. Like, I imagine what caught Jay-Z's attention, or I imagine what caught Dre's attention. It's more than just clout. It's really, really interesting. And the Stellar Ray Theory, which was the first single we got, which he breaks into kind of a chant of sorts. And that reminds me a lot of what we've gotten on later Yasin Bey, Mos Def albums. And then just goes into, some really hard bar hip hop. This album's heavy. It's dense. It takes a lot of listens to really kind of make sense of and stick to your ribs. And as I expected, when it dropped, it was very polarizing, because Mach is very polarizing. There's folks that have been upset that, he's built up this value around him and not delivered. There's other folks that say this is the future of hip hop. You and I have really kind of stood our ground in waving the flag for this album, and absolutely deserves to be in the conversation.
Word. So I agree with that, and it is a dense listen, and an acquired taste, I'll say that. And it's one that I even need to go back to. I haven't listened to it in a few weeks. I want to go back to it and listen to it again with fresh ears, more tuned based on what it is versus what I expected it to be. And I'm sure it'll open up for me differently. I find these really complicated albums tend to be the most rewarding over time.
Yeah.
Albums like um, um, Black Messiah, D'Angelo, and even Yeezus from Kanye turned out to be one of my favorites that year. I put it in that class, not necessarily in terms of quality or whatever, not comparing, but in terms of just really dense, music that takes some time to kind of unpack. Um, I think another thing that is likely polarizing because it's very much a preferred taste is Czarface and MF Doom. Czarface, 7L, Esoteric, Inspector Deck, and anybody I'm missing?
No.
Okay. And then MF Doom have done, this is their second album together. This one is called Super What? And it was recorded apparently in April of 2020. So before Doom passed away on, we're told, Halloween of 2020. It was not announced until New Year's Eve that he had died. But this was recorded in April of 2020 and then finished over the summer. And they had intended to release it much sooner than that, but with the pandemic, it kind of put the brakes on things. Um, to me, it's the finest of the Czarface albums. It's broken up into two sides: the Doom side and the Czarface side. Although Czarface is featured throughout the album. Um, it's a much more upbeat album than a lot of the Czarface music. It's that music tends to be very complicated and dissonant. This one is much more, I think, pleasant to the ear initially. Um, for me, the Doom side is my favorite side. I just think it's light and fun and really captures the frenetic energy that was MF Doom. Starts off with a song that features DMC from Run DMC. Del the Funky Homo Sapien is on this one too, like on that Khrysis album. So interesting to get some tracks from Del. Very off the beaten path projects, but that's not surprising given his taste and the way that he's manifested his music career. Production is by the Czar Keys, which I'm assuming is an amalgamation of the Czarface crew. There's no independent credits. We don't know necessarily who produces what. It would not surprise me if if Doom was also producing some of those tracks because some of them do sound to me like vintage Doom kind of productions. Key tracks for me, and these are all featured on the playlist, are Mando Calrissian. First of all, I mean, that name wins. Like any fans of Star Wars, like you gotta love just like how insane that name is. And like Lando, it's spacey and soulful. And Doom just sounds like perfectly in his element on this. So it's a great way to hear Doom on some of his last tracks. Doom Unto Others is another one. It's just rugged beats and rhymes, and then Breaking the Action is a jazzy sample. It sounds almost like something like what you'd hear from the UMCs. I don't know if you remember their song One to Grow On from the 90s, but it's a real jazz swing to it like that. And there's a great Method Man sample on the hook too. So a lot to chew on from that one, but I really enjoyed that one.
Word. Yeah. We talk about dense listens and albums that require numerous listens to make sense of. If I'm not mistaken, this the last one on our list?
No, there's one more.
There's one
And
more,
it's
excuse
yours,
me.
Arm and Hammer.
No. I meant that album. Is that this is the last of our list? What I'm
Oh,
about to tell you. Yeah.
I thought we were done. I didn't think you agreed to that one. You agreed
Uh,
to that one, Czarface?
no. I meant like I'm going to tell you about Arm and Hammer now. The last of the ones we're putting in the mix.
No. This coming album, the one you're
Yeah.
about to talk
Sorry.
about.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
First, and I should add one other thing too. Uh, the last month, people have been correcting me, not in regards to this podcast, but in regards to life. I like hard days and soft days. I screw up a lot. So if it's Mach and I keep saying Mac,
Yeah,
pardon me.
it's Mark, yeah.
I'm from Pittsburgh, man. We barely grasp the English language. You know, so I say that yeah.
You're a writer,
So
man. You're a writer. Not a talk.
Yeah, yeah. I've got pronunciation for the written word. But so the last album that we're going to talk about today is Haram by Armand Hammer and Alchemist. And Haram, just for context, for those that don't know, it's Arabic for like sin, and it's got slaughtered pigs on the album cover being like pork. Pork is regularly considered to be haram, as my lovely girlfriend regularly reminds me. And it's the sixth album from
Wait, did she
Armand.
tell you how to pronounce it? Because I wasn't even sure how to pronounce it.
I'm good on Haram. Yeah, I'm positive about that one.
Dope. You saved me because I would have been Haram. Like
Yeah.
so that's good. We're all good.
Yeah, Haram is something else. But this is Armand Hammer's sixth album by my count. It's the first one that they've done with Alchemist. And so Armand Hammer is a veteran collective of Billy Woods, who is the mastermind behind Backwoods Studios. So if Mellow Music Group is the ruckus of today, I would advocate that Backwoods Studios is the Def Jux. New York City based label that's been around at least 10 years. I know that I was receiving promos from them when that was still a thing that writers received in the mail. And these guys have just been an independent operation, but they've expanded to work with some veterans like Blockhead, who was tied into the Def Jux movement and produced a lot of stuff for Aesop Rock and others. But this is a really interesting crew to watch come to the light. So, one of the albums in our 2020 list that didn't make the cut that I really have kind of second guessed AFH, and really myself for not advocating more was Armand Hammer. And they put out an album last year called Shrines, which was really phenomenal. But I say that to say it's not always the easiest listen. This is angsty, dense, very in the way that you could listen to a Raekwon or a Ghost and have listened to the same song for 10 years, and then all of a sudden you'll catch what the reference is. I think of like Monty Hall Expo, which you have to figure out who Monty Hall is, and he was the host of Let's Make a Deal. So Monty Hall Expo, and then could it mean Montreal Expo and drop the T? Like, it's that kind of dense songwriting. And what's so dope is to watch an Alchemist come in. This project started, from what I've read, in years ago. 2019, long before Alchemist was Grammy nominated for his album with Freddie Gibbs. But Earl Sweatshirt put him on to these guys out of New York, Billy Woods and Elucid. And they connected. They made some of the album, I believe, through beat tapes. And then eventually these guys came out to LA to work with Al. And you get this incredible body of work. And, like Mach-Hommy, Billy Woods is another guy who, and Doom, guards his identity, guards his face. He's done that his whole career and really kind of wanted to be like, bring all the attention itself to the art. And these guys have been lauded on really respected publications like Passion of the Weiss, DJ Booth, the really trusted core blogs, Dad Bod, Rap Pod, Cabbages. And it's wild because now they've got a feature like, a 2,000 word feature in GQ magazine, or on the GQ website. So to watch this kind of rap raise is really, really remarkable. And for those that follow Billy, he's somewhere between like a James Baldwin and an Aesop Rock, or like that really kind of heavy rap, and that shines on here. And I think that Alchemist gives some of the production that might be more challenging to some of the artists he works with. That's not a knock, but when you have MCs as unconventional as this, they gravitate towards sounds that just stand apart. The album features Quelle Chris, my man Curly Castro, who I have a long history with. It features Earl Sweatshirt, Kayana, Imani, and Fielded. As far as I know, Al produces the whole album. And this one I was really happy, and just for the brand, when you put it on the playlist. There's a number of songs I like, but Falling Out of the Sky, I just looked today, and it's their most played song from the album, and it's a great starting point. It's confessional. It's that kind of like stoner groovy. And in the song, the guys talk about traveling cross country for the first time, what that meant for their career, what that meant the experience like. There's always this omnipresence of what it's like to be Black in this America. And, you know, Billy in particular has rhymed a lot about, you know, the detriments and consequences of that. Roaches Don't Fly is the joint that has one of my favorite beats on this album. Al just delivers it. And these guys rap kind of like slam poets on there. And I'm not sure that they would agree, but that song to me has just been heavy rotation. And then also Wishing Bad, which just sounds like a vent session in audio. These guys are, when I say angst, I mean like punk rock, like in your face. I'm going to get it off my chest. The world doesn't see me or respect me. So kind of fuck the world. I mean, this is great. This is great music for that. And I think that those themes live in a lot of places in hip hop right now. So to watch an Alchemist who can bring an audience with him to a movement that has been going on for at least 15, probably close to 20 years, I think this is really one of the important albums of 2021. And when you look back at, it's not a pandemic album, but when you look back at what the zeitgeist of America was, what the streets felt like in the face of George Floyd, in the face of, you know, unemployment, in the face of all of these things, this album really holds up from a longevity perspective. So it's one that we had to bring to the table.
Yeah, man, it is a very deep album, and it's interesting that the last few albums that we've discussed are probably the densest on this list in terms of just like not being easily accessible lyrically or musically, like really being complicated and requiring the listener to let it expand over time instead of hot takes. You know, I think it's almost like the equivalent of like, you know, indie films where, you know, it's meant to challenge the audience and not be just popcorn fare. And, you know, once again, Alchemist is all over our album selection. You know, clearly we have a predilection toward his beats, or maybe it's just the MCs that we gravitate toward, like the complexity of what he provides them too. So really interesting. Now, I don't know, man. I don't know how we do this because okay, let's go back. We've got 7 albums we agree on.
Mm-hmm.
Benny and Harry Fraud plugs I'm at 2. Evidence, Unlearning Volume 1. Madlib, Sound Ancestors. Maybe.
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 Damn.
If I got to start pulling albums right to get to 10, I might have to go back and revisit some of the ones we agreed on. And you have that right, obviously too. J. Cole, The Off Season, Khrysis, The Hour of Crisis, Conway, La Maquina, DMX, Exodus. That's it, right? And so we have outstanding Judas and the Black Messiah, Skyzoo, All the Brilliant Things, although that's one that I would put on here for sure myself. Devin the Dude, Soulful Distance, Your Old Droog, Time. I would also put that on here. Mach-Hommy, Pray for Haiti, CZARFACE and MF Doom, Super What, Arm and Hammer, and Alchemist, Haram.
Haram. I'm just fucking with you. Yeah.
Haram. Damn. I thought I had it. All right.
No.
Yeah, Haram. Okay, cool. Yeah. This is my pronunciation. I've been like fucking up all episode, but it's all good.
No,
You know,
no. You're
it's
good.
early. It's early. I don't drink coffee. I usually my cardio is my coffee. I haven't had it, so I'm here now. So yeah, man. Any ones that you would pair or say, okay, if you had 3 to pick, what would they
Yeah.
be?
It would be Armand Hammer and Alchemist. It would be I think you're absolutely right with Your Old Droog. And the last one's tricky for me. I'm kind of on the fence between Mach and CZARFACE. For as much as I love Devin, and I wanted a platform to say that, and I wanted a platform to say that to you because you've been fronting on this album. There's moments on that album that I think break the party. I mean, he has a song in there called My Left Nut Itch. And you and I even talked about this yesterday in regards to something else. And I think Devin has to appease a number of people. Well, I think he made an album that is one of the best. When you look at cohesive bodies of work, when you go from Serious Matters to a song about my left nut itch, it kind of throws things off a little bit. So when it comes to those final 3 spots, you and I are agreeing at least on one of them in Droog. I don't know about your opinion on Armand Hammer though.
All right, so we got Drew. That's 8. There's 2 more. For me, I'm going with Skyzoo, All the Brilliant Things, and Judas and the Black Messiah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I'm not mad at that. The thing that I'm mad about.
Wait though. Let me call audible. Let me think about this. I might use my caveat as an out. And I might say that because it's a soundtrack, I'm gonna put it in a different category. I might say that. So if I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna go with Skyzoo. Skyzoo and you know what? I'm probably gonna go with Arm and Hammer too.
Yeah, that Armand Hammer, and it's funny too. I mean, we had a very similar conversation in December of 2020, and we aired on the side. And that this has nothing to do with that, but we included Sky and Droog at the end of the year, and Droog had just dropped in the final days of 2020. And I believe that Time is something special. I think Skyzoo made something special, but I really think that Haram is one of those albums that benchmark 2021, and that's the one for me, that really belongs in here.
All right, so we're agreeing then on Haram. We got one more slot though that we're arguing about, right? You
Yeah.
got I got Skyzoo, and who did you take for that? You took CZARFACE, right?
Yeah, and that's I mean, I love CZARFACE. I disagree with you that this is their best work. I think CZARFACE did a really cool thing to make it fun for fans when they started to make projects like with Ghostface and with Doom. I'm a purist. I'm a hip hop conservative that always tends to think that things like don't screw with the ecosystem. I don't love that album. You were much more taken with it when it dropped. It's not something I've run back to. Um, I'm just not. I haven't been ready for it. So my fight for that between CZARFACE and Skyzoo, I'm much more in favor of Sky personally.
All right, so then we're agreed then. For CZARFACE, listening to it again later, albums can flip the other way too.
Yeah.
And I realize what I love about it is the first 4 songs or so, first maybe 6. The Doom side really I love, and then it loses some steam for me in the second half. Skyzoo though, thematically incredible, just the concepts he's articulating, the diversity of the music. I think it gets stronger even in the second half. Like, I love the first few songs, Free Jewels, and the song after that. But the second half is what spoke to me even more. But it's a deep album, and so if you're agreed on Skyzoo, I think we might be agreed.
I am, and I mean, I love is a strong word. I like Judah and the Black Messiah. I think you were much more taken with that album than I've been, although I agree with the tracks you spotlighted. You said something early on though, and I just want to make sure we're fair to that. You weren't sure about Madlib in the final moment. Are you in a good place with that?
So, okay. So Judas and the Black Messiah, it's not just, I'm not going to use a cop out of the soundtrack. It's also that there's half of it that I really like.
Yeah.
I mean, the half that I like, I love. And like damn near all of them are featured on the playlist. But there's half that I actually don't like very much at all, And so one of the criteria that you and I try and use for these great albums is that I don't know what 70% or so need to be kind of unskippable. I think when you start talking classic, and we're going to get to this in a second, when you get to that 90-95% and above, where like maybe one song is skippable, and there's a lot of people who feel that song too. but Judas and the Black Messiah is not that. It's uneven, but the highlights are phenomenal for me, and it's definitely one of my most played just because of the songs that I gravitate toward on the album. I said that about Madlib only because if I had to choose between Skyzoo or Droog, you know, then I wasn't prepared to give up either one of those. You know, I was going to ride really hard for both of those because I think that both artists deserve this, and I think it gives our playlist a nice, well-rounded, our list a nice, well-roundedness too of like
Yeah.
embracing artists from all aspects of the genre. Um, but nah, Madlib absolutely belongs on there. Like you said, and we both agreed, it's one of the best instrumental hip hop albums I believe in the last couple of years. That Pete Rock one being another one. So yeah, nah, no. I'm no backpedaling on that one.
Man, I feel good about this list. I know we said it might get real. It really hasn't. And I want to add too. I mean, this is halftime. You know, word to Omatic. Things change. I do want to ask you one question. We're not going to get into those albums, but is there an album that's dropped this year that we haven't talked about today that you feel like you have some unfinished business with, that you're, maybe it's dense, maybe it's not, one that keeps coming back up in your rotation that we haven't included in this conversation that we may be talking about in September or in December?
That we haven't included in the conversation for AFH, I don't think so. You know, I will say that I might feel differently about Mach-Hommy by the time year ends, and I might be riding for that one. And yes, but you know, there are some like guilty pleasures I'll say that I have that I need to spend more time with, like Migos Culture 3. You know, I just downloaded that on Friday and have been banging that. I really think that one's dope. I need to listen to the Khaled album a little bit more. So there are albums that don't necessarily fit the AFH prism that I think might, and you know, I've been known to ride for those before, like
Yeah.
Travis Scott, and you know,
And I'm glad you did.
yeah. So that's something that I might have some discussions like that, but I think the ones that will make it difficult over the next several months will be the new stuff that's dropping from the artists we're anticipating.
Yeah, I imagine that too. I want to give just an honorary shout out to Ransom. I mean, he's been incredibly prolific and, put out a joint seven after seven deadly sins. It's a fresh album. It's dropped in the last 10 days. And that's one I'm still figuring out. It's very short, it's 7 tracks long, but Ransom is somebody who's been around a while, is rapping at a very high level. He's been killing the features lately. And I know though that's a catalog in general that I need to spend more time with. We haven't mentioned Lloyd Banks in here. I'm okay with that right now. We gave Lloyd his flowers. That could very easily creep up later. And then the other album that I think is still within reach for me is Rome Streets, another, Brooklyn connoisseur rap. And he made a joint with Muggs that I keep playing. And Muggs is in a really interesting spot, 30 years after Cypress Hill's debut, even longer after 783. Those could creep up, and I love that you and I are people who make these lists in pencil. I mean, they matter for the site, but especially with a halftime list, it really comes in at the end of the year. So I look forward to that.
Word. Okay. All right. So let me recap just to make sure we're in full alignment. So we got Benny the Butcher and Harry Fraud, the plugs I met too. Evidence, Unlearning Volume 1. Madlib, Sound Ancestors. J. Cole, The Off Season. Khrysis, The Hour of Crisis. Conway, La Maquina. Skyzoo, All the Brilliant Things. DMX, Exodus. Your Old Droog, Time. And last but not least, Arm & Hammer and Alchemist, Haram. Right?
Word.
We're good. All right, cool. So one last thing before we sign off. One of the things we talk about is things getting lost in the sauce, and we already alluded to it a bit earlier, both favorably and negatively in terms of like how albums sound like 6 months later. So we wanted to talk about an album that you and I both declared the best of 2020, but did not, for reasons, did not make the Grammy cut because it didn't make the cutoff. And we thought it might get lost given its timing and the flurry of new albums coming up after that. That is Busta Rhymes' Extinction Level Event 2. 6 months later, What's your take on that album? We called it a classic back in the day. What's your take on it now?
Yeah, I still consider that Busta's best solo album. I think that it is a stone in the sands of what the last year has been. I think it competes with any album on this list. And my hope is, you and I have talked about this, the way that the Grammys tend to work, and they try to get the new, hottest artists, but also really respect legacy and a little bit of revisionist history. And in regards to possibly DMX, I hope that Busta gets that look for the next year's Grammys, because that album, it's top tier contender, and you can clearly hear it when you listen back, whether you listen then or you listen 6 months later, 6, 7 months later, that he spent years making that album. And I think that says a lot in this fast moving culture.
Yeah, it's a sonic tour de force. It's got everything, and it's a rare album where listening to the album in order makes a difference. Like it just builds and builds, and it has highs and lows. And I talked about Questlove in a past episode in his masterclass, talking about a classic mistake of newer DJs is to try and like just go hit after hit after hit. And what happens is you fatigue the audience, and at first it's dope, but then after a while, it's, oh, that's dope, I like that song. The human brain just gets conditioned to whatever. We just start to take things for granted. So you got to go up and down to keep the journey really, really ascending. And this album does that. It's got, an incredible guest list. The production is impeccable. Busta is talking about incredibly substantive things. He's got Minister Farrakhan on tracks. He's got Kendrick verses. He's got Q-Tip,
Pete
uh,
Rock,
Pete Rock.
homages.
He's showcasing multiple flows. It's just an incredible album from front to, and it's unskippable in my opinion. Like, and it's long too. It's like 17, 18 songs, not even counting in the deluxe editions, like 23, 24. And it doesn't feel that way. Nowadays, most of the albums we talked about here are under an hour, many are under 40 minutes. It's the new thing to have albums in the 30 to 39-minute range. This is an album that is unabashedly well over an hour, and it doesn't feel like it. So it to me is, it's right up there. It's right up there.
Yeah, I mean, I give it up to Busta too. I criticize Devin for not being able to let go that part of his audience, and you try to appease everyone. And I give you a lot of what you echoed in terms of dropping, CZARFACE is how I feel about Devin. But I look at Busta, I look at making an album this long with this many songs, and he really does hit on every point of his career, every bucket of his fans, from native tongues to the gangster rap side of Busta to the dance hall side, etc. And he still keeps it at that 90, 95+% of, for me, and it sounds like for you, of audience satisfaction. And we're I don't like to call myself a critic, but we're hard to please at times.
Word, word. All right. So anything else you want to cover?
What do you anticipate right now? Because the season's closing. What do you see as the 5 albums that the Grammys nominate?
Ooh, right now, man. Well, I hope the Buster gets in there.
Yeah.
I really do. I'm not sure that he will. I think they'll nominate Khaled because that's the way the Grammys work. J. Cole will definitely get nominated, although KOD did not. So I don't know, that they're bugging sometimes. Um, I think that it's quite possible, just because of the high profile nature, that Judas and the Black Messiah will also.
Mm.
And then coming in at number 5 is going to be, I believe, DMX Exodus. And I think that X might take it for the win.
I think that's a really, man, I mean, if I was a betting man, and I did buy some lottery tickets yesterday, I like that projection a lot. I yeah, I would love personally to see Ev in lieu of Judas and the Black Messiah. I will be clicking my heels together if a Rhyme Sayers release is nominated for a Grammy. But Ev, I believe, has a Grammy from what he did with Kanye West on College Dropout. Stranger things have happened, and this is an era of leveling the field. But yeah, I like that list, and I hope Busta gets the look. So it's interesting, and not for nothing, the cutoff is usually October anyway, so there's a lot of baseball to be played.
Word, there's a lot. If Kendrick comes out, could be like all bets are off then. Drake is usually a Grammy favorite too. So there's a lot. There's a lot that could happen.
But yeah, we have some good things to catch up on. You mentioned the evidence interview, which is a great conversation. So we'll catch up accordingly in the very near future. So what's your song of the week, man?
My song of the week is Avalanche by Migos. It's the
Mm.
first song on Culture 3. It's a they tap into the Papa Was a Rolling Stone Temptation sample.
Oh damn.
And it's a much more traditional kind of rap flow than what people are used to hearing from Migos. I actually added it to the playlist. I think they smoke it. I think they smoked their LA Leakers freestyle that they did this past week. Yeah, I dig this album, so I'm gonna go with that. How about you?
When Friday hit, Droog and Sky were so good. Just as another reflection of our list, that usually I was working my way through the new releases. I haven't gotten to Migos yet. I have a 5-6 hour drive later today, and I'm gonna sit with that because I like, especially with those trap beats. I like the car system for that. So I'm gonna spend. You just made a convincing case. My song, we alluded to it on this podcast not that long ago, but I'm gonna go with "Been There, Done That" by Dr. Dre. Album doesn't get a whole lot of love. I love that song as a kid, and yeah, just dug the video about turning the pages and leveling up. And yeah, man, I'm feeling that energy this week.
Yeah, that was my favorite song off that compilation for sure. The Aftermath presents. Yeah, really dope. Word, man. Well, always a pleasure on these. I'm curious to see what the audience thinks. This is I think a really interesting list. I think it's going to stand out too, which is one of our criteria. So
Yeah, man, I think so too. Well, let us know what you think. Please apologies for any mispronunciations from either of us, and we'll move from there.
we're not perfect, but we try hardest.
Word up.
All
All
right.
right, peace.
Peace.